Hey everybody, I'm David Burns, EAS Certified Master Beekeeper, and I'm so thankful that you're interested in how to control the Varroa mite. A lot of beekeepers just don't want to address the reality that mites are the #1 cause of why colonies have so much trouble today. And for those of you that live in the north and struggle getting your bees through the winter, mites are the #1 cause why bees are not making it through the winter. But it's not just northern beekeepers that are experiencing problem with mites. No matter where you live in the U.S., mites are a serious problem because they spread diseases. So when I started keeping bees, mites weren't really a problem. Then they quickly became an issue in our country. And I had to go from keeping hives relatively easily to really struggling with keeping mites at bay. I was shocked the first time I looked at a hive that was attacked by mites. And back then, we didn't really know what to do about it. They were just devastated all across the country. And so now we're looking at ways that we can keep mites out of the hive with minimal invasion of the colony. And what I mean by that is, when they first hit, we threw a lot of toxic chemicals in the hive, fluvalvinate, coumaphos, and we really thought that we could knock these mites out once and for all. But what we only discovered was that these chemicals were really getting absorbed in the wax, and they were causing problems, making our queens and drones sterile and affecting the brood nest area where they raise their young. So over the last 20, 30 years, we've been quickly trying to figure out ways to get off that chemical treadmill and use things in the hive to control mites that are less invasive and don't affect the bees as much. I mean, when you stop and think about how do you kill a bug on a bug, it can be challenging. So what we're looking at today is ways that we can actually control the Varroa destructor without the use of harsh chemicals. Now, there are many chemicals that are used in the hive to control Varroa destructor. And what I try to do is take an approach where you use minimal chemicals as possible. So I'm going to teach you how to use things like green drone comb, how to use a screen bottom board, how to use powdered sugar dusting, how to use a technique of breaking the queen's brood cycle to reduce the amount of mites in the colony. Those are 4 big hitters that really do keep your mite levels down. But it's not something you can wait and do at the end of the year before winter comes. It's something that you need to be doing all year long. And believe me, you're going to have to get that into your management skills. Now, there are other things that I recommend when you get to a place that you can't control your mites anymore with these 4 methods. Maybe you've waited a little bit too long. Maybe you haven't been using your green drone comb, or maybe you've gotten busy and can't use powdered sugar dustings, or you can't take the time to capture the queen in a cage and break the queen's brood cycle. In those cases, and your mite levels get really high, then it is time to use something like what I suggest is Mite Away Quick Strip, which is a formic acid, or you can also use something like oxalic acid as well. So to do our mite test, you're going to need a glass jar. You're going to need a lid, like a canning lid, without the insert plate in it, like the ring of a canning jar lid. And you're going to need some screen. So let me show you how to make your own jar with the screen so you can test mites for yourself. So this screen is a little difficult to find, and what I want you to do is, if you ever have an old bottom board that you're not going to use anymore, salvage the screen from a screen bottom board. That's what I've done here. This is just screen. It's 1/8 hardware cloth. That means the gap of the screen squares are about 1/8 of an inch. And so what I do, I just save some of this screen, and now I'm going to take the jar lid like this, and what I want to do is just draw out a circle around my canning jar lid. I'm using any kind of pen will work. I'm using a Queen marking pen, and it gives me a good way to mark the area where I'm going to be cutting the screen. Now I just take some metal cutters, some shears that's made for cutting metal, and I'm just going to go around. I'll just cut it out kind of like a square at first, and then I can trim it more carefully once I get it cut out of the screen. And you don't have to be real exact with this, because your lid it has an area here where it's going to catch on the lip of this lid. So the screen doesn't have to be exact. You can play around with it. So now I'm just cutting around my blue line, and let's see how close I get. Now the blue line is on the outside of the jar lid, so it might be a little big. But again, I can trim that to make it fit perfectly. So I'm going to take that. All right, it's a little big. Let's test that out. Getting close now. In fact, it's a little too big, but I can force it in by just pushing it down. And as you can see now, I've got a nice screen, and it just fit right in here perfectly. And now that gives me the jar that I need to actually test for mites. So the next thing we have to do is actually put a mark on our jar at the 1 cup mark. Well, how do you measure 1 cup of bees in a jar? I do it by taking 8 ounces of water, which is 1 cup of water. I pour it into the jar. I take my same Queen marking pen, and now all I have to do is make a mark. It doesn't have to be rocket science exact, but I put a mark at the 8 ounce 1 cup level on this jar. And then when I pour my bees in, I just have to bring this level, this amount of bees will give me 1 cup of bees, because this is 1 cup of water. And the final thing we're going to do is take a tip of the hive tool like this, scoop up this much of the powdered sugar. It can have 10% cornstarch in it, store-bought, it's fine. So about that much, just a big tall scoop on the end of your hive tool, and place that into the jar. That will be the amount of powdered sugar you need. Okay, so since our queen is already caged up over there, we have an opportunity just to gather these bees up. So a good way to do it is just to pull your jar down and let the bees fall into it. So what I'll do, we may have to do a couple of frames to get our numbers where we want them. But we'll just take the jar like this and pull it backwards, tip it in so that it rests against the comb, and just watch the bees fall into it like this. Let's do the other side to get some more. We need a little bit more. Let's put the lid on it and see what numbers we have, and if we need to get some more, we will. Alright, so we'll just, now see, we need more, so we're just going to go to the next frame over and get some off of this one and add to it. Now to do that, let's see, let's get everything where we want it. A lot more bees on this frame. Tap it down a couple of times. You take the lid off, very few are going to fly out. That's going to give us the numbers we need. We'll put the lid on it, put this frame back, and we'll take a number reading and see if we're close. If you want to wear gloves on this test, you can. If you have a feisty little hive, why not? Okay, that's close enough for me. It's approximately a cup of bees. All right, so let's put the hive back together. We got our queen cage. So once you have your bees in your jar like this, what we need to do now is actually roll them around. Now, you don't want to actually tip them over because the mites could fall out. And bees have some royal jelly on their tongues. Things are going to get wet inside there. But you want to get as much powder on those bees as you can. And that's going to make more of the mites fall off. So kind of make sure you get a lot of white on bees. And it's not going to hurt the bees. Bees are exoskeleton. This will not bother the bees at all, other than just how you would feel if you were tossed in a jar, dumped with sugar, and shaken about. I'm not saying they're not a little bothered, but it won't hurt or kill them. We'll just put them back in the hive when we're done with our test. Now, let's go ahead and put a paper plate down, and I'll continue to kind of roll them around and we'll take a mite test. This hive has not had any mite treatments. Not really much work has been done to prevent mites on this colony. They have their original queen since I installed the package on April the 27th. So after all that time, they've had a chance to generate a good amount of generations of bees. So this will give us a chance to really do a mite test. What we're looking for are phoretic mites, adult mites, on the bees. Now these adult mites are getting on bees in the brood nest area. I'm continuing to smoke a little bit because I'm shaking above the hive. Probably not a good idea. You may want to move that plate somewhere else. But my camera was here and it's handy for me. How long do you shake? I don't know. Why don't you shake it maybe 3 minutes, 5 minutes at the most. Will give you a good reading. I'm going to just kind of take my jar and bang it against my hand like that. You might see other things arrive on your plate. Tiny little, who knows what, you know, other little bugs, tiny little things. Yeah, definitely don't do this over a hive. Alright, that gives us a pretty good shake. We've done this long enough now, I think, to have gotten a lot of mites off of our bees. I'm doing a radical final little shake here. Alright. Now what I do next, students, is I take a jar of water bottle, and I'm going to pour it into this solution of powdered sugar that's been shaken off the bees. That would allow me to see the mites really easily because they simply just float to the top. Now, as you can see on this hive, we do have mites. All hives have mites. I assume that's why you're taking this course. And by the way, thank you for taking this course. As you can see here, this is a mite. And as you can see right there, there's another mite. So this hive actually has 2 mites per 1 cup of bees. And that's what a mite looks like floating in a plate. These other things, like you might say, well, what is that there? I don't know, some kind of a piece of pollen that may have broken off. You'll get little pieces of things like that. But again, a mite, you can see it it's very easy to detect what it looks like. Okay, so 2 mites out of this test. So then you can just discard this sugar water. That's sugar water because we poured water on powdered sugar. But there you can see 2 mites. And I'll help you with the math in just a minute. We'll calculate all this out. And we'll talk about a plan of what we should do if we see, 2, 3, 300. We'll talk about different scenarios. By the way, like I said, thanks for taking this course with me online. I hope it's very educational for you. And if you think this is a good one and you're enjoying it, I do have other online classes that are just as good, if not better, especially getting your bees through the winter. If you haven't taken that class, my goodness, you need to take that class. So keep that in mind.